Have you ever asked yourself why there has been such an emphasis to hate trans people lately? Our food prices are climbing, wages are stagnant, healthcare is broken, and yet somehow, the biggest threat we're told to fear is a tiny, marginalized community that makes up less than 1% of the population. Why?
Political bear nation ready to dive, where opinions spark and the debates thrive. Hold on tight.
Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to tackle the war on the trans community, but like most issues that I break down on this channel, the money trail can help us tell the story. Before we can even start talking about the trans community, we have to go back and understand how another community was targeted and who funded the propaganda that told you to hate them. Let's start by talking about the gay community. In 1996, only 27% of Americans felt that gay marriage should be recognized, but support for same-sex marriage climbed over the next decade. It reached 55% by the time the Supreme Court legalized it in 2015, and today that number is 68%. People were ignorant, and many times that was through no fault of their own. People fear what they don't understand, and I'll include myself in that group. I wasn't always an ally. See, you had groups like the Family Research Council that created a national platform of hate and specifically funded legislation both here in the United States and around the world to oppose gay rights. This group tried to pass laws against pornography, abortion, same-sex marriage, gay adoption, and even divorce. Its founder, James Dobson, grew up in a very strict household where dancing was not allowed, and if he acted out, his mother would beat him. Later, as an adult, he worked as a family counselor at the Poconos Institute of Family Relations, where Paul Pocono advocated for the mandatory sterilization of the mentally ill and disabled. Pocono spread his hateful views to unsuspecting couples, telling them interracial marriage was bad for humanity. Pocono believed in eugenics, but popular publications like the Ladies' Home Journal recommended future brides to seek out his counsel. Pocono didn't just promote forced sterilization or that whites should only marry other whites. He also taught women to have traditional gender roles, and he tried to use pseudoscience to defend his ideology. If you recall in a previous video that YouTube did not like at all, I talked about how Charlie Kirk used false statistics to defend his racism and ideology. Paul Pocono made those ideas popular in the 1940s. In an article called "Now is the Time to Have Children," he wrote, girls who go to college often try to assert their individuality in marriage. Result? Their divorce rate is 4 times higher than that of college men. His insinuation was that if women wanted to have a healthy home life, they shouldn't seek higher education. They should marry someone within their own race and acknowledge that women are indeed inferior to men. Now, let's get back to Dobson. Dobson spent 4 years with Pocono, but when the American Psychological Association removed homosexuality from their list of mental disorders in 1973, Dobson, who had a doctorate in psychology from the University of Southern California, resigned from the organization and created Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family was like a religious version of Walt Disney. Dobson started with a small idea, but he built it into a media empire. He started with 2 radio shows, Adventures in Odyssey and Focus on the Family. But he was able to grow his message with 10 radio shows carried by over 4,000 radio stations, 11 magazines, and best-selling books like The Strong-Willed Child and Dare to Discipline. He taught parents that hitting their children was an act of love, something he learned from his mother. He continued to expand his influence through youth basketball camps, and he even sent his proposed sermons via fax to thousands of pastors, so he was able to control a unified message across Christian America. Like his teacher Paul Pocono, he believed women were inferior to men, and in his books, he criticized the Supreme Court for legalizing abortion and ranted against the Equal Rights Amendment, saying that guaranteeing equal legal status for women would endanger the future of our families. In the 1990s, he was getting more politically active. He would even meet with presidential hopefuls like Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, columnist Pat Buchanan, and even with Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole and House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Because he was getting more politically active, he created a spin-off organization, the Family Research Council. At first, the Family Research Council was initially a division of the Focus on the Family, but it became an independent entity in 1992 for tax purposes. See, the Family Research Council was becoming more and more active in their lobbying efforts, and if the Family Research Council stayed as part of Focus on the Family, he would have lost his nonprofit charity status. The Family Research Council was called the Vatican of the religious right, and James Dobson was their evangelical pope. And even though Focus on the Family was legally separated from the Family Research Council, Dobson pulled all the strings. He continued preaching about the importance of traditional gender roles, and he hated homosexuality. A few years after the Family Research Council legally separated from Focus on the Family, he met John Polk. John Polk was a gay conversion leader. Polk was gay, but convinced himself he wasn't. See, Polk knew he was gay since he was a teenager, but he was depressed and expressed this to a pastor, and he said he must be depressed because God didn't love him, and God didn't love him because he was gay. And that's when this pastor told him about a group called Exodus International. Exodus spread the lie that being gay was a choice and that you could simply pray the gay away. He attended a long-year program called Steps Out of Homosexuality, where he lived, ate, did Bible study, and attended church with 11 other people. Yes, they put them in groups of 12, just like the disciples of Jesus Christ. One of these individuals was a woman named Anne, who was there to stop her lesbian tendencies. They formed a close relationship, got married, and even had 3 children of their own, convincing themselves that they were not actually gay. James Dobson appreciated this and hired him in 1995. John was so good at convincing himself that he could suppress who he really was that he created his own conversion therapy program, and it was called Love One Out. He created the program while he was working in the homosexuality and gender division of Focus on the Family. He was so good at convincing others that he was no longer gay that he became the chairman of Exodus North America. While his paycheck was from Focus on the Family, his elected position as chairman of Exodus was a volunteer position. That is, until he was spotted in a gay bar in D.C., and that's when everything unraveled. John Polk would go on to denounce conversion therapy, separate from his wife, live his true life as both a gay man and a personal chef in Portland. But that came much later. The question you really should be asking right now is, who funded all of this? During the mid-90s, Focus on the Family had a budget of over $100 million. Now, a lot of that money came through individual donations from millions of evangelical Christians that he reached through radio broadcasts, direct mailings, and book sales. But he also got funding from billionaires like the DeVos and Prince families. Those names may sound familiar, and they should. Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education under Donald Trump's first term. You may remember that Betsy DeVos rescinded the Obama-era Title X guidance, which told schools to take sexual harassment and assault claims seriously, and clarified that transgender students were protected under the Title X's ban on sex discrimination. Betsy DeVos rescinded all of those guidelines. Eric Prince founded the military contracted company Blackwater that was investigated for killing 17 innocent Iraqi civilians in Baghdad. Today, Blackwater has been rebranded, but Eric Prince also happens to be Betsy DeVos' brother. So how did the DeVos and Prince families make all their money? Richard M. DeVos co-founded Amway, or as some of you may call it, Scamway, because it was essentially a pyramid scheme that got away with a favorable ruling by the FTC in 1979. DeVos was a major donor to the Republican Party, and through the Richard and Helen DeVos Foundation, he donated to Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council. In addition to giving them his money, he gave them access to the vulnerable people that were part of his organization. Richard DeVos allowed religious leaders like James Dobson and Robert Schuller to preach to the company's sales force that was well over 1 million people at that time.
I have to say, I don't think there's an organization like Amway to command my respect and affection and esteem.
And while Amway has been scrutinized for using Christianity to take advantage of vulnerable people, it still happens to this day. It's just more hidden than it used to be. Betsy DeVos was born Betsy Prince, daughter of Edgar Prince, founder of the Prince Corporation. Edgar was an engineer and started a manufacturing company who later made auto parts. The key to his wealth was patenting a car visor with lights. GM bought it to use in the Cadillac line, and that's what made him a billionaire. As a fundamentalist Protestant, he poured a ton of money into Christian causes, but he also co-founded the Family Research Council, and his children carry on his legacy to this day. Between 2001 and 2014, the Edgar and Else Prince Foundation donated $6.2 million to the Family Research Council and $5.2 million to Focus on the Family. The Alliance Defense Fund, now rebranded Alliance Defending Freedom, was created by 30 separate Christian ministries to defend family values. An example of this was their involvement in the Boy Scouts of America versus Dale court case. Alliance Defending Freedom defended the Boy Scouts who fired a gay scoutmaster after learning he was openly gay. The ADF argued that forcing the Boy Scouts to accept Dale would violate the Boy Scouts' First Amendment right to freedom of expressive association, since the organization claimed that homosexuality was inconsistent with its values and core message. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of the Boy Scouts. And for those that have stayed with me since the beginning of this video, now is the part where I can finally land this plane. The same organizations that have been attacking the gay community are the same ones that are attacking the trans community. You have undoubtedly heard claims on social media like, you think it's okay to have men play women's sports? Or you think grown men should be in bathrooms with little girls? These organizations have spent tons of money pushing these ideas with radio, TV, and social media ads to spread these hate-fueled myths and lies, and then use their team of legal experts to pass policies and legislation to discriminate against the trans community. And when politicians won't pass the legislation that they want, well, then they find new politicians to challenge the incumbents. If you're in a red or purple state and you're targeted by them, you either need to change your policy or face an onslaught of negative ads. Most people know how anti-trans Nancy Mace is. That's been one of her defining features. But did you know that's not always who she was? In 2021, during an interview with the Washington Examiner, she said, "I strongly support LGBTQ rights and equality. No one should be discriminated against." She supported the Fairness for All Act, which was aimed at banning discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, although it did allow certain exemptions for religious organizations. She went on to say, "It isn't a black and white issue. I do believe that religious liberty, the First Amendment, gay rights, and transgender equality can all coexist. I'm also a constitutionalist, and we have to ensure anti-discrimination laws don't violate First Amendment rights or religious freedom." But in 2024, she led the way to ban transgender women from using women's restrooms just as the first transgender representative was elected to Congress. Why the sudden change? Well, there was a concerted effort by the American Principles Project, led by Terry Schilling, to attack Nancy Mace and her approval towards the trans community. Check out this ad.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace says she's a conservative, but as soon as she got to Washington, she started acting like Nancy Pelosi. Mace sponsored a transgender rights bill that would destroy women's sports. She thinks it's just fine to let men take opportunities for scholarships and championships away from female athletes. The bill would put men in girls' locker rooms, men in women's prisons, and even men in battered women's shelters. Conservative? Not even close. We can do better. Vote against Nancy Mace on June 14th.
And there you have it. Nancy Mace completely switched from being an LGBT ally to being anti-trans because she was going to lose her seat. And who funded this? The same people responsible for Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation. As part of their Protect Women's Sports campaign, they co-branded with American Principles Project, led by Terry Schilling.
Welcome, everyone, to Family Talk. It's a ministry of the James Dobson Family Institute, supported by listeners just like you. I'm Dr. James Dobson, and I'm thrilled that you've joined us.
American Principles Project was founded in 2009, and it was founded to preserve and protect the Republican Party. When we were first founded, we were focused on religious liberty and marriage and monetary policy and Latino outreach, and some of those things are still true today. The LGBT movement specifically had been collecting scalps of our champions for almost a decade. They went after Pat McCrory in North Carolina, who was the governor at the time, and he signed a bathroom bill into law. And this bathroom bill, it was not controversial, but the LGBT movement made it controversial. This whole transgender industry exploded on the scene after we lost at the Supreme Court on gay marriage. This transgender movement really propped up and started, making a big PR push of putting men into women's restrooms, into their locker rooms, into their showers, into their sports. And, the only criteria was that these men had to claim to be women.
So what's their end goal? What do they hope to accomplish? Well, there are two types of groups. There's the Christian nationalist donors and those that simply want to use the anti-trans agenda for their own political expediency. See, Christian nationalists like Dobson, Prince, and DeVos view trans recognition as a theological threat to traditional gender roles, which they believe is a threat to the American way of life. Other groups, like the Shell Foundation, run by billionaire Phil Anschutz, or Stand Together Trust by Charles Koch, use the divisiveness on trans rights as an easy way to mobilize their conservative base. The Council for National Policy organizes all these groups together, so whether a group backs anti-trans legislation for religious reasons or for politically expedient reasons, it aggregates them all, and everyone gets on the same page. Together, these organizations are incredibly powerful and pollute the minds of unsuspecting people by fundraising propaganda that you can't even tell is propaganda. And they even got to me, particularly when it comes to trans athletes. So let's get to some of those trans myths. Myth 1. Biological men shouldn't be allowed to play in women's sports. First of all, trans athletes are extremely rare. There are over 500,000 athletes playing college sports, and transgender people make up about 1% of the population. So there should be around 5,000 trans athletes playing college sports, but there's just 10. That's 0.00002% of all college athletes. 18 states have already passed and enforced laws restricting sports participation of transgender college athletes, and even more have been proposed, including laws at the federal level. H.R. 28, Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2025, was passed by the House of Representatives in January 2025 of this year for 10 friggin' athletes. America is being duped. Even Gavin Newsom and Bill Maher have made public statements about how unfair it is to have trans women that were born as biological men, compete against women that were born as biological females. And I believe this too. I thought this was just common sense, but that's because I believe the lie. And shout out to John Oliver for breaking down the myths of trans athletes. I'll put a link to his video in the description below, so go ahead and check that out after this video. One of the biggest lies that I believed was that biological women lost 900 medals to transgender athletes, and both conservative and liberal sources incorrectly labeled this 900 medal loss report as being conducted by the United Nations, when in fact it was simply submitted to the United Nations. It was never researched or produced or even condoned by the United Nations at all. The number of lost medals were based on a crowdsourced website called shewon.org, where anyone from anywhere in the world can submit a claim with virtually no verification whatsoever. It is a made-up number and included competitions like dancing and poker, where there is no benefit at all to being born as a biological male. The report also overcounted the number of medals by concluding that if a trans woman won first place, that means there were 3 biological women that lost medals. The second place finisher would have placed first, the third place finisher would have placed second, and the fourth place finisher would have placed third. The 900 number is completely bogus. Additionally, what these publications won't tell you is that the report was created by Reem Asylum, who is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, commonly known as a TERF, just like J.K. Rowling. She denies that she is anti-trans, but 550 nonprofit organizations have publicly called her out for her anti-trans propaganda. But guess what happened with her report? Alliance Defending Freedom used her findings in legal briefs. Tony Perkins, the current president of the Family Research Council, used this report in his congressional testimony. The Heritage Foundation, the same organization behind Project 2025, has been promoting it excessively. And this famous number is based on nothing but pure bullshit. Let's get to myth number 2. You think grown men should be in bathrooms with little girls? This sounds kind of like common sense, right? But again, it's just more bullshit. First of all, there is no way in hell you can enforce legislation that bans people from using bathrooms that don't match the gender indicated on their birth certificate. Are you going to check their genitals? Do people need to carry around their birth certificates? And will security guards control who enters every bathroom in America? Are you going to base it on looks? Because there are lots of women that look like men, and there are a lot of men that look like women. And that is actually compounded when you're talking about children and teenagers. Look at Lex. Do you think he should be using the women's bathroom? What about this dude? Or this dude? Or how about this kid? This woman, who was born as a biological female, was harassed because someone thought that she was trans. No, she just cut her hair. There is no way to enforce this law. Secondly, there are over 200 municipal laws that protect transgender people's access to bathrooms consistent with the gender they live with every day. None of those places has seen a rise in violence or have any other public safety issues. This is a solution in search of a problem. The reality is that over 90% of offenders already know their victim. They are either a family member, a priest, or an authority figure. They are not strangers in public settings. But what is most disturbing is that nearly 61% of all sexual abuse cases against children involve a parent, a step-parent, a sibling, or another relative. The Family Research Council spends millions pushing this lie, but the reality was that their own executive director of lobbying, Josh Duger, was sentenced to 12 years for possessing materials of minors in 2021. The calls are coming from inside the house. It's not drag queens, it's not trans people, it's not strangers in the dark. Myth number 3. Trans ideology is being pushed on children in school. Is being straight a choice? Did you choose to be straight? Did you have gay tendencies and decide you were going to be straight anyway? No. No one can be made transgender. Gender identity is inherent. You were born the way you were born. I know that's tough to hear for some parents because they don't want to think that their genetics or biology is the reason their son or daughter is trans or even gay. But that is what the science tells us. The Family Research Council and the Alliance Defense Fund have been aggressively lobbying state legislators to stop transgender ideology in schools. But this is insanity. While 20% of all high school students have considered offing themselves and almost 10% have attempted to do just that, 41% of transgender youth have attempted to do so. The reason why transgender acceptance is taught in schools is not to try to make someone trans or promote some woke ideology. It's to save lives. We're talking about protecting the lives of American children here. We have to stop this attack on the trans community. It's coming from all sides. There's absolutely no reason why we are attacking the most marginalized communities in America. While there are a ton of organizations that are funding the anti-trans and anti-LGBT agenda, Alliance Defending Freedom and the Family Research Council have played a major role in almost every case. And for what? So we can make the lives of the most marginalized community even harder? So that trans youth that are already harassed and bullied feel like they have no choice but to harm themselves? We should all be ashamed. Now take that disgust and turn it into anger by coming out to a No Kings protest near you on Saturday, October 18th. I know one protest won't solve everything, but it's a damn good start. And while you're waiting, check out my video about media consolidation or my video about Leonard Leo. I'll be there.